Next, assemble the PVC bodies of the lightsaber together and draw a black line right down the length of the PVC pipes and put it aside. Next, take your 1.375-inch aluminum body tubes and you're going to tape the small body tube on the larger body tube with a piece of tape. Make sure that the center lines match up nicely. Okay, now once we have the tubes here taped together, there appears to be 4 long rectangles that are made on this lightsaber, and we're going to have to make those. So I'm going to show you how to do that. This is a template that I made here using a compass, and that I made this circle here the same diameter as our body tubes. So as you can see here, that at the 12 o'clock position, this is where the center or C here of our body tube is going to sit, and over here at the 2:30 position is where the rectangle markings is going to start. Don't worry about this 9:30 position here, we're not going to use that at all. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to place it upside down, and I'm going to take one of the body tubes. Take the body tube, the larger end of the body tube, and you're going to place it on the template, have the C at the 12 o'clock position, and as I rotate this here, you can see that at my rectangle marking here, take your black marker and you're going to make a mark right here and then make a line up your body tubes. To make our rectangle here on our body tubes, first measure halfway up your small body tube and you're going to make a mark. Once you have your mark, the overall width of this rectangle here is 9/32 inches wide. So obviously 4.5 this way and 4.5 this way. Take your marker and just draw lines across. The overall length of this rectangle is 15/16 of an inch. So make it at that measurement, and obviously this here is going to be 9/32, and then just draw out the rectangle. Now once you have drawn this out, it is best that if you want to number them, because when you trim them out, not all these are going to fit properly back together, and you want them to match up nicely once you start assembling your lightsaber. Also, when you are going to start trimming out this rectangle here, you're going to trim out up to this black line here, which means that you are going to trim this black line out of your body tubes so that it'll give you the proper size and scale. And also, if you make a mistake on this here, in case you don't like the lines, you could use a nail polish remover or paint thinner to wipe off the marker on your body tube. After trimming, don't forget to deburr the edges on the inside of your body tubes. And here's what the rectangle cutouts should look like on your body tubes. Now, inside of this cutout here, there is another rectangle that actually goes on the inside of this. So again, we're going to have to fabricate that piece. Take what's left of your 1.375 aluminum tube here and make a mark 13/16 up from a nice smooth finished edge, and make a mark as shown here, and wrap a piece of paper around again, and then bring the paper right up to the mark. And once you have the paper in place, just tape it across, and always use the paper as a guide when you are cutting out your aluminum tubes so that you get nice straight edges. Once again, use your Dremel tool to cut this section off your body tube. Once cut, measure each rectangle at 5/32 inches wide. Use a Dremel tool to cut off this length off the body tube. And once the rectangles have been made, measure 5/8 of an inch from one end of the rectangle, and using a thinner cutoff wheel, cut at that mark. Once the lightsaber is going to be put together, these rectangles are going to be separated by at least 1/16 of an inch apart. Deburr your edges once you are finished cutting. Now we're going to make Darth Maul's emitter rings for his lightsaber. His emitter rings we're going to be making out of this 12 by 12 by 1/16 inch aluminum sheet. And there's going to be 4 separate hole saws in making this process. The one hole saw is going to be the main ring itself, while the other hole saw is going to be drilling out the center of the ring so that the PVC pipe can go right through it. So just a quick note here, I actually had to go out and purchase an 1 3/4 hole saw so I can make my 1.5 inch rings, and I'll show you how to do that momentarily. But the first thing that you're going to want to do right now is to take your 2 1/8 inch hole saw, and you're going to want to trace the outer diameter plus this inner threaded circle here onto your aluminum sheet. And as you can see here, I already have one of these templates here already drawn out on my aluminum sheet, and this is going to be utilizing the most out of my aluminum sheet, as well as giving me less waste. So you're going to need to make 6 of those 2 1/8 inch rings. To make up your 1.5 inch rings, as shown here, I want to show you how to do this process. First, take your 1 3/4 hole saw, place it on your aluminum sheet, just keeping it a good distance away from your other templates. Take a pencil and trace out the inner circle, the inner center circle of your hole saw, and remove it. Take your pencil and kind of estimate where the center of that is. Once you have that, take your compass, measure 3/4 inch on your ruler for an 1.5 inch circle, place the point on the mark, on the pencil mark, and trace out your circle all the way around. And once you have that, take your drill with a 1/16 inch drill bit and drill right at the center of that mark. This drill mark here is going to serve as a pilot bit when we cut out our 1 3/4 inch holes. This circle here that you see is where you will have to take this disc and bring it up to your belt disc sander and trim right up to this pencil mark for your 1.5 inch ring. The first thing that we are going to make is the main ring itself. So we're going to take our 2 1/8 inch hole saw, and the inner diameter of that hole saw is actually 2 inches, which will give us a perfectly 2 inch ring. So we're going to make 6 of those. Then take your 1 3/4 hole saw, and we're going to make 4 of those rings. But the inner diameter, it does not matter because we still have to trim up those rings. Take your aluminum sheet and place it on a piece of wood. This will ensure that you will not damage your work table. Take the drill and carefully center it onto your template of the ring and carefully drill through the aluminum sheet. Do this for your 6 2 inch rings and your 4 1 3/4 rings. And here's the main rings cut out of our aluminum sheet with the edges deburred. And now we are ready to make the center holes in our main rings. Now I actually sat down and thought about this for a while because I want to do this project right and I want to make sure that it comes out looking good. Before I did ask you if you can use your 1 inch and your 1 1/4 hole saws, to make out the holes in your main rings, but I'm actually going to steer away from this, and that's because if you haven't seen it already, is that hole saws can actually dance across your work area, and what that can result in is a much larger hole in your main ring, and resulting in that your newly formed emitter ring will not fit snugly onto your PVC pipes. So I'm going to steer away from these. What I do recommend using, it's what's called a stepper bit or a unit bit. Now this will actually increase the size diameters of the holes up to an 1 1/4 inch, and it will fairly give you a nice clean hole after you are drilling. You can get one of these bits at your local hardware store in the hardware department or in the electrical department. So the only downside is that this bit is about $45. And as obvious as you can see, here's our finished emitter rings. Now I have made some mistakes in making these emitter rings, but I will show you the proper way on how to make them. But first, the ideas that I had in using a hole saw and a unit bit, just chuck those ideas out the window. The hole saw, as I mentioned before, can increase the inner diameter of your main ring here, and these rings will not sit properly on your PVC pipes. And as for the unit bit, as you drill out the center here of your main ring, what will happen is that the unit bit can actually grab the ring itself and just throw it right off your pliers, and it would create damage to your finished surface, and you don't want that. And if you keep on re-drilling out the center hole with this with the unit bit again and over again, it'll just keep flying off your pliers. So I would just not use those ideas at all. When you do cut out your center holes in your main rings, in case I haven't mentioned it before, but here's what you want to do. You take your pliers here, the inside of them have some teeth, and you don't want to use those teeth to clamp down on your aluminum because it will leave marks. Just take a piece of paper, fold it over a bunch of times so it can be, you know, rather thick, and then just place it on the inside of your pliers. Then take your main ring and then just kind of clamp down on it, and this will help prevent marks and heat transfer to your hands. To make the center holes here in your main ring, here's what you can do. Let's just say that this here is our main ring, and what you're going to do is take your PVC pipe and center it as best as you can onto your main ring. Once you have it centered, take your black marker and trace the outside diameter onto your main ring. And once you have that, take your Dremel tool and make a bunch of cuts on here as shown, at least right up to your black line. And what this will leave you with is a bunch of triangles in the center of your main ring. And again, take your cutoff tool and start cutting these triangles out towards the bases up to your black circle here. And once you have that, all these triangles here should be out of your main ring by now, giving you a newly formed emitter ring. Now what's going to be left is going to be this much material left here onto your newly formed emitter ring, and this will have to get trimmed out. So take your sanding drum and make sure that it is a heavy grit sanding drum, and you're going to trim out, or I'm sorry, you're going to sand out the remains of the aluminum here on your newly formed emitter ring up to your black line. Sand close up to your black line and trial fit your newly formed emitter ring onto your PVC pipes. Once you have achieved a snug fit, use a lighter sanding drum to deburr your edges. And please be sure and be careful that these rings are going to be very hot when you are cutting and trimming them with your Dremel tool, so use extreme caution.